Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead, and with me today is Greg Soulje. Welcome, Greg. Great to have you back here on a Tuesday.
Well, nice to be with you, Sarah, on a Tuesday that features, for a change, at least in the our part of the Corn Belt, kind of feeling like mid-June for a change, and it's just a little vanguard, a little tease of what's coming our way here over the weekend and probably next week as well. You want it hot, you want it humid, you want growing urea units. Look out, here it comes.
Right, and we've been running really behind, at least
Yes,
here in Illinois. I probably the
yes,
Midwest, but just a lot more cooler than normal is what I've been hearing. And you're probably the source of that, but
yes,
other folks are saying that as well. That just been a lot of cool degree days compared
yep,
to what's normal. So,
exactly.
yeah, well, let's we do want to remind everybody before we get started here on our quick update for today that tomorrow we will have a longer term update. Greg will be
Yes.
back with us for a longer term forecast, looking at some of the tropical storms, what that forecast looks like, how that might influence a drought condition this summer. Maybe you want to give a little bit of a plug there, Greg, on what we're going to be talking about. But
Yeah,
that's tomorrow at 1:00 Central
Yeah, the
here on
live
Feedstuffs.
the live stream is actually what you pointed out, a half hour, and there'll be opportunities as well when you join in to the broadcast for questions. So feel free to talk about that. And yeah, we will update the summer outlook. And between you and I, I'm getting a little bearish on the drought, but it's with asterisks and bells and whistles with all that attached, and it's all dependent on what goes on in the Atlantic. So we'll take a look at that. We do have that hot dome, that hot ridge is coming into position, but seems to be migratory, moving along, and we'll talk about that. The rest of the summertime season, the tropics, and it will have a direct influence thousands of miles away on our upper air pattern and how rains or no rains play out across the plains and Corn Belt going forward for the rest of the summer and early autumn season.
All right. Well, let's get into our short-term outlook here today. Put up your slides and I'll let you take it away.
All righty, here we go. And some of the headlines and highlights, generally speaking, with the exception of the far east and southern Corn Belt, it's that roughly I-70 corridor to the Ohio River, where there are still some rains down there at the current time, and the flood watches remain up in effect. Generally speaking, 93% of the soybean acreage has been planted. That's a little bit behind, but not by much, splitting hairs on the 5-year average of 94%. Crops, heavy birds are doing relatively well, with the exception of the Ohio Valley and maybe some areas of the western Corn Belt, although they've had some recent rains out there into parts of Nebraska and Iowa. But 72% of the corn, 66% of the beans rated good to excellent. We'll see how those ratings play out now in the next 10 days to 2 weeks to 3 weeks in some areas of the Corn Belt, particularly the eastern areas, because we're just going to throw a switch and turn heat on. And sometimes when you go from these cool weather patterns to seasonal temperatures, and then you've got the heat, and we're talking mid in some areas upper 90s. The famous, as the commodity guys know, they know the 588 height line on the 25,000 foot upper air chart, and the 594 headline or highlight or line that moves through the upper Midwest. When you talk about that, you have a mound of air sinking and compressing, and hence the heat aspect in the forecast with humidity, with wet grounds. And so you're going to go from one direction or another in these ground conditions. And sometimes these roots are sitting in water, and no matter the the genealogy or the genetics of the seed, sometimes those root systems don't do well when they have to immediately go digging for a deeper water supply when you're pumping in mid and upper 90-degree heat. So that's the cat out of the bag aspect of the forecast here going forward. Thunderstorms in the plain states, they have been rocking and rolling through Nebraska and Kansas, 101 mile per hour winds at Wichita. I'm sure that flattens some stuff out there. 89 mile per hour winds from the thunderstorms late Monday out at Hutchinson, Kansas. So otherwise, triple digit heat readings out there in some areas of the Southwest High Plains. Storms have been dominant through New Mexico, western Texas, and of course the drought is over with officially in through Oklahoma. Elsewhere, different story, especially up to the north. Southern states really in excess of soil moisture, and the beat goes on there. And boy, it is going to turn awfully hot and humid in that Tennessee Valley, mid-south area going forward here in the next 5 to 7 days. 30% surplus on topsoil moisture. Arkansas, Alabama, basically everywhere in the deep south and southeastern states. And they're still wrapping up cotton planting operations, would you believe, in some areas, probably 5 to 10% in those deep south and southeastern states. We're talking about row crops here. Got to take into account livestock operations. You're going to right now make sure that those water lines are going, fans and ventilation are going, shade areas are going all through the Midwest, the mid-south, the far eastern and southeastern plains going forward here in the next 5 to 10 days. Again, from normally cool to a few days of seasonal to all of a sudden the heat is on. And this, again, hot ridge is going to be migratory. It's not the one we're looking for so far. If we can get it to back up with time, there's your key to the forecast going forward, and the tropics to get busy as well. But we'll talk about that tomorrow on Wednesday. There's the Tuesday afternoon maps and charts. Are going to get hit pretty good with there's, I believe, a enhanced to moderate risk of severe weather, especially centered on Kansas and the Nebraska Panhandle, those areas of red this afternoon. Pretty good coverage rains again for the Ohio Valley, easternmost sections of the Corn Belt in through Kentucky and Ohio. By tonight, showers and thunderstorms expand across the plains and western Corn Belt. Heavy and severe Nebraska Panhandle down to the northern fringes of Oklahoma. Pretty good rainfall into the Ohio Valley. And what's nice about this is for still some of the lingering drought-ridden issues, and we'll take a look at the drought monitor in just a second, there ought to be some decent rains on a more broad basis over those western Corn Belt areas in the southern Great Lakes region. Got a lot of radio friends, and we do radio in downstate Illinois out of Champaign, Danville, and that area. And boy, they had some significant rains in small corridors over the late Friday, Saturday timeframe over the past weekend, from Springfield to Decatur to Champaign to Danville, maybe an hour's drive either side of there to north of Indianapolis last night and this morning. 1 to 2, in some spots, 3 to 4 inches of rain came on down in these systems and these storm clusters that just did not move. And that's the story there the past weekend. But you do see the rains moving in a pretty good fashion over the Midwest Corn and Bean Complex over the course of later tonight and Wednesday. And they continue into the rest of the Eastern Corn Belt Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday night, into probably Thursday across the Ohio Valley. There they are by tomorrow morning, with at least drier air, slightly cooler air expected to move on through the plains and western Corn Belt areas. And depending on how we can wind down the morning thunderstorm activity will dictate on how severe the weather may be. Now, we'll get it this afternoon in the western Corn Belt, how severe the storms get tomorrow afternoon in those eastern Corn Belt areas, sometimes because of debris clouds, leftover rain, warming cloud tops, etc., so forth and so on. We can't recharge the atmosphere with instability, and then sometimes the thunderstorms take a while to get going, and they don't have the ferociousness sometimes, depending on how the morning convection goes. So we'll see how that plays out. Next 48 hours, there is the rain into Kansas. There is the rain again, Missouri and through Arkansas, and welcome rains. 3/4 to 1.5 on the lower side, 1.5 inches maybe on the higher side, coming across southern Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, your place, Sarah, and my place here in northern Illinois through the lower lakes region. So kind of just what the weather doctor ordered there. And we're going to need every drop of that rain going forward here into the weekend and probably a good part of next week. But there's still no shortage of rainfall making prospects. Severe weather into Kansas at a moderate risk this afternoon. Severe potential at a slight risk over the rest of the western Corn Belt areas. And again, if we can get the sun out a little bit for an hour or two, kind of scour out the debris clouds from the morning rain, then things will hop pretty quickly and pop into severe weather mode for St. Louis, Champaign, up to Fort Wayne and into the Maumee Valley there of northwest Ohio. That is a big ag producing area. For now, the tropics are quiet. We'll talk about additional reasons behind that. And we'll just leave it at this. There's been record high temperatures in all places in Puerto Rico and San Juan. In mid-90s. Yeah, it's hot down there. It's humid, but mid-90s are a little bit warm, and we'll tell you why that happens. And it's a trip off to what's going on in the tropical basin when you get together with us here tomorrow on Wednesday at 1 o'clock Central. The weather pattern active for this point coming up on the third week of the month of June. 1 to 3 inches, as we talked about, out of the Central Plains, good part of the Corn Belt, heading through the Mid-South, ultimately into the Northeast, into New England. Then on in the wake of that, 100-degree heat builds in to Nebraska. And that 100-degree heat, by the way, would be surprised we get into approaching that over some eastern through southern Corn Belt and Mid-South Ohio Valley locales at some point in the weekend or maybe next week sometime. So again, we are concerned, as you would expect, with this quick turnaround temperatures for row crops and livestock operations as well, poultry operations. You folks got to be ready for this heat coming in over the weekend and more so into next week. Tropical moisture, by the way, and it's the reason why we're going to build this big mound of high pressure up aloft. The tropics are a little bit active, but in the far southwestern Gulf of Mexico, out of the Yucatan, and some of the northern extent of some of that tropical moisture may catch places like Galveston, Corpus Christi, Brownsville, the lower Rio Grande Valley over the next several days. So there's the Friday, Saturday, Sunday time frame from an upper perspective. You know, the U-shaped configuration, that's a trough, that's unsettled weather, and there'll be some storms with dry base storms, and hence the lightning potential flares up into the western states, but a significant cool off, and there will actually be some rain into the Pacific Northwest, but a lot of severe weather, southern Canadian prairie, high plains areas between Saturday and Sunday, into the western Corn Belt, northern areas Monday, and probably trying to get into the Great Lakes region and parts of at least the eastern Corn Belt, northern areas, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. That high, that HUC, let's say over Kentucky and Tennessee, and the Ohio Valley, you see a little number attached to that. We're not going to get into the dynamics of all this, but it's one of the numbers, the 588 line and the 594 line this time of the year are capable of 95 to 105 degree heat if you have to adjust for clouds and soil moisture and all that. But that's a trip off. There's issues, a stacked or warm atmosphere, too warm to make convection, but you get on the left side of that high. Tell you, when the storms get going, they'll get going, and they will be ferocious when they do get going. And so that's the concern. We're still into a wet pattern, which is okay, but it's going to come at a price, I think, in some of these Corn Belt locales on the backside of this hot ridge, which is moving for now eastward. But I think with time, we're seeing the main ingredient. It's got to move back westward, and the only way to do that is get the Atlantic Basin going. And when that happens, the high moves, but the Atlantic Basin is lacking for now in its tropical development. And just like we said, it's going to be a later arriving tropical season. The Feds say it's earlier. We think it's later. We say El Nino's still going on. Feds say it's not. Tune in tomorrow. There's the Friday, Saturday, Sunday maps and charts. You can see a snappy low coming up out of the upper Midwest. There will be some wind that helps with the ventilation standpoint. But boy, with the wet grounds and high dew points coming up into the upper 60s to mid 70s, not much cooling at night. You'll need the fan going, the AC going, keep an eye on those livestock operations. So you do see kind of a front straddling and stalling out from the Great Lakes into the Central Plains in that Monday, Tuesday timeframe. If you were to translate that on the backside of that hot high, you know, if we can bust the cap, as we say, that's another term that the commodity guys and the market guys watch for. When the weather forecaster saying a cap or busting the cap, it's all or nothing. You're off. Once you bust the cap, you're off to the races. These thunderstorms make their own dent into the weather pattern and the plains and Corn Belt locale. So that's the concern here, that we'll have additional rains, but it's going to be a pretty stormy pattern as well in those northern and central Corn Belt areas back into the plain states too. There's the next 7 days bullseyed into Nebraska and Kansas, the central Corn Belt, Great Lakes region. So with dryness and drought in mind, here it is, the best rains coming into the worst dry, drought-ridden areas of the plains and Corn Belt locales. Now, there's going to be some runoff issues. We've got severe weather-related issues, but we've got some rain and the heat. So, you know, all things considered, if we were going to go into a complete, more widespread drought set up with this kind of heat, then immediately, even with relatively early development, we'd be talking about some crop losses out there already. But I think, and the fact that the heat is progressive, moving, will help out with time as well. But there it is. You can still see some issues down through South Florida, the southwestern states, really over the eastern third of the country. No significant dryness and drought still lingering in the plain states, the desert southwest. Fires will become the story out there when we get into the monsoon season out there. More lightning-based anything before we get the organized rains going in the desert southwest. And, of course, that leads to flash flooding sometimes. There is the trough. We brought this map up. It's the next 6 to 10 days or probably the next 2 weeks just for conversational purposes. The trough is over the western part of the country. The hot ridge is pretty dominant still through the Ohio Valley, eastern Corn Belt. But the systems will have the ability to come out of Canada, kind of move down on the northern and eastern side of that high and kind of retrogress it slowly. Yes, weather does actually back up in the upper air from east to west. So we may begin to see that. It's probably about 2.5, 3 weeks out before we see that. And when that happens, that should kind of relax things in the Atlantic, and then we get going in the tropical season. So it's probably mid-July, before things get going, I think, outside of maybe down in the Yucatan or the southwestern sections of the Gulf of Mexico. Again, for just giggles here, there's heat ahead. There it is. That's 95 to 100 degree air. Could even be hotter in drier areas. But remember, a lot of moisture in the grounds. And sometimes you take the moisture, turn the heat on, bake out the grounds, roots struggle, crops go the other direction. In the worst areas of the Eastern Corn Belt right now, because we're still planting or development's been stunted because of too much rainfall there. The next 2 weeks, the heat again is winding down. You can see some pockets of actually slightly cooler than average weather, southwestern states and into the northern plains. So there's at least a movement to the upper air weather pattern like we've been talking about. Precip the next 6 to 10 days, bullseyed on where we need it. It's a wide area of the country up the middle that's going to get rainfall. Need it in the Pacific Northwest, Northern Rockies, even Arizona and West Texas. That's the monsoon trip off that season is going to be getting underway over the next 10 days to 2 weeks and go out 2 weeks through the end of the month. There's still rain in the forecast. So, Sarah, that's it.
Very good. Yeah. Glad to see there's some precipitation coming to some of these areas. That's great. And even if it comes with some heat, nothing wrong with that. So
yeah, it will come. It will come at your nice little docile, organized, steady soaking rains. It will come by fast and furious, vigorous, strong, and severe on this particular setup. It'll be really all or nothing. Bust the cap, get on the backside of the hot ridge, get 65, 75 degree dew points, and voila, things blow up, and these storms will have a mind of their own. You're just tracking thunderstorms. They can reconfigure the atmosphere in a smaller scale and a medium scale with rain-cooled air, outflow boundaries, et cetera, so forth and so on. So lots to talk about here, lots to update. And again, I think a key to our forecast going forward is what lies ahead in the Atlantic Basin when that gets going. And so far, it is on a delayed mode, at least from our thinking. And we'll talk about that in greater detail tomorrow.
Right. Great short-term forecast here today, looking a week, maybe a little longer out. And then tomorrow is our longer-term forecast. 1 p.m. here on Feedstuffs 365. So we hope that you all can join us then. All right, Greg, thank you for your time here today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.